Hello and welcome back to the Birdcage. I'm Jack Kenna, joined alongside Jayhawk Slant contributor Sam Winton to recap Kansas's 81-73 loss against the Kansas State Wildcats. They're so inconsistent, and
Mhm.
I fear that's the only word that comes to my mind right now is just inconsistent. You have such a great game on Monday, and then you follow that up losing to your rivals on the road. You can explain it better than me. You've been following this rivalry in Kansas a lot longer than I have. What are your thoughts about that game in particular and then the team that we have on the floor this year?
Yeah, I just think when it really comes down to it, K-State came out with more energy. You can see that, and when Kansas is trying to come back in the second half, K-State always has a shot in response. KU didn't really look like they were ready to go play in what was going to be a tough road environment.
Yeah.
I think, K-State came out early, took a lead, and really just never looked back. And I think you've kind of seen that a lot with this team this year. You look at the Missouri, the Creighton games, even going at Iowa State, like they've really struggled in these like the top tier road environments that they've been to, which is honestly really surprising if you look at a team that has the most D1 experience in the country.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, but it's a team that just hasn't been ready to play. They haven't found that consistency night in, night out. They haven't been able to carry over energy from big wins, which I think is really surprising. And it's a look at the leadership and the coaching of the team that just hasn't really been up to what the Kansas standard has been.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say there. Kansas has now lost three straight times in Manhattan. And there's a crazy statistic on the last time that we've lost three straight to Kansas State on the road, but it's kind of blinking my head right now. I think Ben was saying the 40s.
Yeah, I think it may be something like the 70s. I know it's the first year since like the 80s that they've lost to both Missouri and K-State in the same year.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Self didn't like that call out in the interview. He said the numbers were skewed.
yeah.
But then he went on to blame it on the fact that they chose not to play defense that night, which in my opinion doesn't skew those numbers. Come out
Yeah.
ready to play against your rivals, but I don't know. There's a lot to say there. This was a game where offensively Kansas scored enough to win.
Yeah.
73 most games for KU. You're sitting there and you're like, well, their defense is one of the best in the countries. Surely,
Mhm.
if they can score 73 points on the road, they'll get it done. Now, it just wasn't the case here. Kansas State made life difficult for KU on defensively. They made 11 three-pointers and shot 50% from the floor, which is just really interesting considering Kansas up until recent or up until I guess yesterday was looked at as one of the top five defenses in college basketball.
Yeah, I thought it was a really poor defensive showing. K-State's bigs are super athletic and they really gave KU some trouble. And then
Yeah.
you look at a guy like Doug McDaniel who like absolutely owned the game in the
Oh
backcourt for
yeah.
K-State, finishing with 15 points, 11 assists. Like he completely controlled the ball screen offense, and KU's ball screen defense was bad. Their interior presence was bad. It was just really all around a pretty dreadful defensive performance. I thought Zeke Mayo got exposed a lot on the defensive end by K-State's
Mhm.
guards, just quicker, more athletic, getting into the lane. And then I thought Hunter was so bad defensively. There's been a lot of talk about his defense. I think Saturday was really a poor showing, just not being able to get back off after ball screens, not really
Yep.
affecting the rim at all for a guy who's 7'2" to not be able
Yeah.
to be that interior presence is really tough. And then yeah, just a really good showing by K-State. I mean, they were obviously ready for it. They know what happens in Manhattan recently is K-State beats KU. So
Yeah. You touched on Hunter's defense, and that's very interesting because statistically, Evan Mia pointed it out. Statistically, when Hunter's on the floor, there's not a huge drop off in team overall defense. In fact, the numbers would actually point to when he's on the floor, the team defends better.
mhm.
But I can't help but notice I rewatched the Kansas Creighton game a few days ago and looking back on the game yesterday, they put Hunter in ball screen actions and it feels like a guaranteed bucket every time. Whether that's his man or it's the one handling the basketball, it just looks like it's a guaranteed 2 points every single time.
Yeah, he's just too slow. Like in the grand scheme of things, he's slower than the five man that he's guarding, and I mean he's obviously slower than the guard. So what KU has done pretty much since Hunter's been here is like the hard hedge, and then the guy tags from the corner, weak set help, whatever. And it's worked sometimes. Like if the tags are good and strong, um, Hunter has enough time to get back usually. But teams have just, I mean, teams figure out like, okay, we're just gonna put Hunter in ball screens on like every possession, and eventually we're gonna get a good look. We're either
Yeah.
gonna get the look inside, the guard's gonna be able to get to the rim after breaking the hedge, or swing it to the corner. You've got an open three there. So I think it's really tough for Kansas when Hunter's still playing like close to 30 minutes a game, and teams are
Mhm.
really looking to expose him on the defensive end by putting him in ball screens. Like as a one-on-one defender in the post, obviously he's really good, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
7'2", big. He knows what he's doing down there, but as soon as you bring him out onto the perimeter, it's so easy for guards and other athletic bigs to just go right at him.
It's very interesting. You brought up the one of the main killers of the game, Doug McDaniel. I think he had one of
Mhm.
his best games in
Yeah.
the Kansas State jersey. It took him a while, and it even took Coleman Hawkins a while to get going. But this Kansas State team, I think 5 straight wins for them. This is a team that is heating up, and Bill Self talked about it in the post game. Everyone goes to Kansas City. Like this is
Mhm.
a team that is capable of knocking off some really good teams the way that they're playing. I just I can't help but feel like it was still a poor loss from this Kansas team. I know it was on the road, and I know Kansas State's playing their best basketball, but this is one that Kansas should have had.
Yeah, I mean, you still look at it as a 500 team, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they've figured things out recently. They've been one of the best teams in basketball over the past like 4 or 5 games. But it's still a game that, Kansas doesn't shouldn't lose, right?
Yeah.
I know it's your rival. I know it's a big time game for them. It's a big time game for Kansas too, because this team hasn't figured out how to win on the road in tough environments.
Yeah.
And I think that's really like when you look at this team compared to last year, it really just it feels like the same team with just a couple different pieces. They haven't been able to reach their ceiling, and it just kind of feels like, okay, they're going to win the games at home. They may drop one or two more on the road, go into the Big 12 tournament, see what happens there. But by March, I don't know if you can really have too high expectations at this point from Kansas.
And we'll talk about that now. This team had high expectations. AP number one for the second straight year in a row. A huge, brutal loss on the road to K-State. They dropped in the rankings a fair bit last week. What do you expect this Kansas team to come into the AP poll on Monday? And then how do you expect all this to translate to March Madness in the Big 12 tournament?
Yeah, I mean, you get the win at Iowa State. I don't think they'll drop too much. I think they're 16 right now. I would be surprised if they're outside the top 20 still. So, I mean, you pick up a top 10 win at home. That'll be a big driving factor. But I think as you look forward for this Kansas team, they've got a really crucial stretch here at the end of February, right? They've got a bunch of games that should be pretty winnable. Colorado at home, at Utah, Oklahoma State at home, at Colorado. Really, they shouldn't lose another game at the end of February. I
Yeah,
mean, you look at BYU, maybe that's a loss. So maybe you figure out really what you have over this month of February. They really need to get better. They've got a
yeah.
tough stretch at the end of the regular season, Tech at home, at Houston, and then Arizona. But
Mhm.
really for this Kansas team, it's they've got to figure out, how do we win against really good teams because it seems like
Yeah,
they need to find some sort of consistency. Like if they can bring the energy that they brought against Iowa State every night, I think they're probably still a top 10 team. They're a contender to make a like at least a second weekend run. but then, you've come out fully flat against Kansas State and, it just looks like a team who's going to get bounced in the second round again. So they've got time, right? There's still a lot of season left, but it's a big turning point where they need to figure out where they're going. Otherwise, it won't end well in March.
Yeah, you brought up their next few games, which all seem pretty winnable. In theory, should all be wins. Colorado, Utah, two kind of Big 12 bottom feeders, even though Colorado
Mhm.
knocked off UConn. Then you have Oklahoma State, but that's a home game, should be a win. And then you have to travel to BYU. Kevin Young's doing a lot of good things over there, but still, it's at the end of the day, it's Kansas versus BYU. And this is a BYU team that hasn't looked the greatest in Big 12 play, nearly, I think, 500 or even maybe even below now. But this is a stretch that's all winnable. But then the end of the year comes and you have Texas Tech at home. And then you travel to Houston. You finish off with Arizona, who recently is looking like one of the best teams in college basketball. I know they're literally handing out wins earlier in the year to teams that they should have beat. This
Mhm.
is an Arizona team that is peaking at the right moments and at the right time. And Caleb Love is putting together a very sneaky good last month of basketball.
Yeah, Love's been solid. Arizona's been super impressive recently. Just beat Tech last night. Game between two of the top four teams in the Big 12.
Yeah.
They're figuring it out. They were preseason, top 25, maybe even higher than that for a reason. They've really figured it out. They're a scary team. I think maybe, I mean, obviously the game at Houston's really scary, but Arizona's really good, well coached. And so is Tech. Like those games in March are going to be a grind, all three of them. And, Kansas has proven to not really be the, great home court team that it has been, already picking up a couple losses in
Hmm.
Allen Fieldhouse this year.
Yeah.
So those are games where, if this team is really going to find something, it'll be in that stretch heading into the postseason, where if they can win, two out of three, if they can win all three, I think you get a lot of confidence. But yeah, I mean, they have to figure some things out.
Hmm. So we're looking ahead. Colorado, I don't even know if they've won a Big 12 game all year.
I don't think they have. I think they're still
I,
winless,
I
0 and
think they're
11.
winless in the Big 12.
Hmm.
We have them at home on Tuesday. This team has shown their ability to be extremely inconsistent. However, I feel like if you rolled with a backup starting five, this Colorado game would still be decently winnable. What do you need to see from Kansas to feel more confident about this team going forward?
I said it like it's all about energy with this team. Their their talent is like enough. They're probably not the most talented team in the Big 12, but when they come out and they play with energy, they'll lock you down on the defensive end. And that leads to a lot of easy buckets. That leads to just confidence. When you're really guarding a team and making it hard on them, I mean, Bill Self has talked about even when you're not playing well, if you can make the other team play poorly, that's usually enough to win. And Kansas has proven that this year when they've beaten really good teams, it hasn't necessarily been because they've put together like a stellar performance. Maybe UNC, but I mean UNC has fallen off a cliff at this point.
Yeah.
But like even the games like you look all the way back at Duke and Michigan State, I
Mhm.
don't think they necessarily played like the greatest 40 minutes, but they made the
Yeah.
other team play poorly enough where they can come out with a win. And I
Hmm.
think that really has to be, the identity of this team. If you, look at guys like DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams that are supposed to be really good defenders,
Yeah.
obviously Shaq Moore, Flory Badunga, like this team is, and Ryland Griffin, I think, is a pretty underrated wing defender. But you look at this team and its body of work, they've beaten teams when they've been really good on defense, and they've lost games when they haven't been good on defense.
Yeah.
So I think I mean, that's really the key at this point, and with the makeup of this roster and the way they play, it's got to start on the defensive end.
Yeah. This is a Kansas team that dropped outside the top 10 on Ken Palm. They've been not Ken Palm merchants, but analytics love this team. They're experienced, they can guard, and they have Hunter Dickinson and maybe one of the best pure point guards in college basketball in DeJuan Harris. Metrics love this team, and this is the first time in a while where I've seen them outside the top 10 in Ken Palm. Their defensive rating is still fifth. Their
Mhm.
offensive rating, 39. The lowest offensive rating out of teams in the top 16.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's a little scary when you really think about it. Like this team can at moments look like one of the best teams in college basketball. But then we've seen games like West Virginia and Mizzou and Creighton and even yesterday where they don't look like they belong. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's coming to the end of the season. This is a little scary to see. Not what you want to see for sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing and what's been the problem with this team, for the last couple years is just not having like that true bona fide leader. Self has talked about, this is like a team that kind of leads by committee, and that can work, but when things do go wrong, when you go into a tough place to play, when you don't have that, one guy that you can kind of look to is like, okay, this is the guy that can really get us going. We can trust him. He can almost will Kansas to a win. I don't think Kansas has that type of player.
Yeah.
Um, because like Zeke, the thing with Zeke is like he's, I think, a really good complementary piece,
Hmm.
but at times it's like he looks too timid. He's gonna, pass up an open shot for a pump fake and then pass the ball away. Or
Yeah.
he's not gonna be the guy that you can really rely on because he hasn't been able to do it at a high level really on the road. I mean, K-State he had 15 points, but I think he only took 2 shots in the second half when, Kansas needed a spark. He just
Yeah.
disappears. The same thing with KJ. He didn't score at all in the second half. He had 13 in the first half, and he was really a guy that Kansas relied on. But then when it came down to it in the clutch, it's like he disappears. And then the thing with Hunter, it's like I don't know if he's necessarily the guy that should be looked at as the leader of this team. Just I don't know. It doesn't feel right, and then it feels like DeJuan's too quiet. It feels like the pieces just they don't fit. And, this core hasn't really been able to figure it out over the past 2 years. And it's like, at this point, what can they change, to really to make a difference at this point in the stages of their careers because they've been at Kansas so long that it just seems like they are who they are.
Yeah. And I've had this conversation a few times with multiple different people. This Kansas team is so talented. On paper, it's the most, I guess, maybe Alabama, but those two teams are the easily on paper the two most talented teams in college basketball. And yet again, it's just another year of things not clicking. It's not working out. It's not looking how it's supposed to look on the floor. It's just kind of confusing, and I don't get it. And that's the reason why I'm not the coach at Kansas because I don't understand how it's February 9th right now, and we're not getting AJ Storr to actually produce something worthy of being on the floor.
Hmm.
How are we still having games where KJ Adams is playing more than 25 something minutes a game? Flory hasn't looked nearly as good as he has in his past or when he was making a stretch when KJ was out.
Hmm.
Hunter's not the best defender. But how are we still not able to figure out a way to still make him useful on the defensive end of the ball? I just feel like, and I don't want to put blame on coaching at all because Bill Self's one of the best coaches in college basketball history. But when you
Hmm.
just kind of think about it, it doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, it's disappointing, when the team has as much talent as it has. And again, they just kind of fall flat and haven't reached their potential and their ceiling. And I
Yeah,
think, I mean, you can have a valid criticism of the coaching staff for that. Just, maybe it's not recruiting the right guys, or maybe it's not, coaching them to the best of their ability. But at this point, it's like the pieces really haven't worked in this super heavy transfer portal era for Coach Self. And It's tough because he can build a really good roster, but if they're not playing to his standard, they're not going to get on the floor and they're just
Yeah.
not able to really develop over the course of the season. And you're kind of left with what we've seen, I think, for the past couple of seasons.
You have any final takeaways for the K-State game? I just feel like that game going into the game was already a little scary, knowing that we've lost the past 2 years, and it's like Groundhog's Day. I don't feel like it got any better
Hmm.
yesterday. I think K-State just outplayed us, really, and that's the only thing that you can really point to because I don't feel like Kansas played good enough to get a win there, and K-State really wanted to beat them. And I feel like at the end of the day, that's just kind of what it is. One team played harder than the other team, and that's kind of the result you have to walk away with when
Yeah,
you really
absolutely.
come to play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, K-State came out and they wanted it more. It's pretty much as simple as that when it boils down to it. Yeah. Again, like I said, Kansas has time to figure some things out, but if they can't, then it's probably like another early exit in March, and there will be uncomfortable off season where it's really looked at as a reset. You lose a lot of this core. It'll be interesting, I think, to really see. I mean, obviously, who knows how the season ends, but if it's like an off season 2 years ago where a bunch of guys transfer out, or one like last year where they're able to really keep everybody and supplement the roster. But I mean, that's way ahead of things, and probably shouldn't bring that up now. But yeah,
Yeah. It'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting next few weeks for Kansas because they really need to find something that works and have everything kind of start clicking. Sam, I appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me this afternoon.
of course, of course.
For everybody else, we will have previews and recaps for Kansas basketball the rest of the way. I'm really doubting we'll have one for the Colorado game just because maybe I can get Liam Carson on here to talk about the Buffs a little bit, but
There you
we'll
go.
have to see. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys share, like, subscribe. I learned that I have to do that in my content creating class in order to draw people to the channel. Sam, I appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me,
Yeah, of course.
and we'll see you guys later.